So, what are the benefits of a CID? Imagine a neighborhood where all that live, work and visit in Fresnaye can walk around safely. Streets and sidewalks are free of litter and waste, and parks are upgraded, maintained and safe for children to play. A CID provides a clear, well-tested way to boost municipal services by channeling 100% of the additional money raised back into the neighborhood. Besides for a safe, clean and green Fresnaye, what else will I get for my money? Increases in property values through improved and perceived desirability of the neighborhood, as seen in other CID areas, potential decrease in insurance premiums, potential decrease in individual security spend, a holistic community-oriented and community-driven approach to addressing the needs of the area, united and proactive front to advocate for the changes to council, costs are borne proportionately by all property owners, transparency and accountability. Fresnaye, a community together.
Thanks so much everyone for coming and welcome. I know it's a difficult time to be out and about. And welcome to everyone online. Thank you so much for joining. The City Improvement District of the 18th of August 2021 initial public meeting. It's going to be one of several meetings that's going to be held before you'll see any actual movement, but it's very important that we get the ball rolling. I'm not on the steering committee. I am simply making sure that the meeting runs smoothly, although I don't know if that really should be put in my hands, but I'll do my best. The meeting is now officially open. And to give you some more details of what a CID actually is and why people behind the scenes have been working so hard to make sure that Fresnaye gets a CID, I'm going to hand over to Ed Brunt and Neil Isdale. Ed is online and Neil is here in the room. Neil's at the podium. I'm going to give you the microphone.
Sometimes it's an emotive topic because obviously it has a clear and direct benefit and impact on everyone in the community. I'd like to add that we welcome all engagements from everybody that help drive out a clear understanding of the concerns and needs of the community. I think we're all aligned on one thing here, and that's that we want to make our fantastic area as great as possible in the most cost-effective and frictionless way. Okay, so I'll just start with a few thank yous for everybody that's helped make tonight possible. Obviously, thank you to Annika for giving up your time to be with us this evening and hosting. Thanks to our guest speakers on the panel, so Samuel, Sif, Jacques Weber, Francois Lawrence, and Alderman JP Smith. Thank you very much for attending and for taking time out of your schedules to give us your thoughts, insights, and valuable experience in this regard. Also, a big thank you to our representatives from the city here, so Renan Rousseau, Yupi Yabe, and Eddie Scott from the city CID department. They've been basically hand-holding this process from the beginning, making sure that we're compliant and we're sticking to the regulations as they stand. Also, a big thanks to Dan Stillerman, who all of you online will have heard, from the Excel Academy for managing the Zoom meeting. And thanks to Stephen from Dimension Data and Rick from Robot. They're both in the room here, making sure that the tech operates effectively. And finally, thank you to the venue for hosting us this evening. We appreciate this as a community effort. Okay, so to step straight into it, thought it would be useful if we give everyone a baseline understanding of what a CID actually is. I mean, there's lots of information out there, but the principles we'll outline in a few slides' time. We'll follow that on with a bit more context into why we think Fresnaye is a good candidate for this particular mechanism. Ed will then take over, and as Annika mentioned, he's going to be from home, and he'll give us some answers to some of the common questions that have arisen over the last 2 years as we've engaged with the community. We'll also give a bit more additional background on the boundaries of the areas, who's in, and he'll also give a little bit of background into the members of the steering committee who've been working so hard to get us to this point. We'll then move on to the panel discussion, and then we'll talk more about the detail of the business plan that we're proposing. Right, we can move on to get the right page. Okay, so what is a CID? So in essence, it's a well-tested and well-regulated mechanism whereby communities can define an additional amount of rates that they want to be levied, and then the community itself controls how those rates are spent within the area. So there are a few key things to highlight here. So it must be initiated by and governed by the community through an NPC. The city obviously has oversight of that NPC through monthly meetings. It needs to be a geographically defined area, which we'll get to now. It needs to be a logical area, so it needs to be contiguous. You can't have like 2 houses here, 3 houses there. It's got to be one area. Everybody in the defined area are included, and they're obliged to pay the additional rate. So it's not an opt-in. Once it's established, it's not an opt-in. The city will collect the additional rates through the normal rates process, and then they pay it over to the CID NPC, the monthly budget amount. The benefits of this are we get to leverage the city collection processes, which minimizes admin for the NPC and cash flow constraints, and 100% of the funds are sent back into the area. So it's ring-fenced 100% and spent within the area and spent per the CID business plan. So there's no cross-subsidization of other areas like what happens with all our other rates. So as you'll see, the business plan is defined according to feedback from the community. We had to go through a process of getting a survey that was conducted by at least 20% of the property owners. There were over 300 people that responded. So that kind of guided us into how to define the business plan. And it covers more than just public safety. So it's whatever the concerns are of the community. So cleaning, greening, social development aspects are also included. So it's not just a security thing. All right, so why do we think this is a good mechanism for Fresnaye? So 85% of the participants in the survey basically indicated that they love their area and they wouldn't want to live anywhere else. So we've got a good, strong community network. And as a community, we should all be committed to making the area that we live and operate in as livable and desirable as possible. So there's been overwhelming support from the public. So 86% of the people that filled in the survey said they would support the establishment of a survey. And in essence, the community believes that more could and should be done around the aspects of safety, cleaning, maintenance, etc. within the area. Finally, there's 47 other CIDs within the city. They're all operating well, and the communities are seeing benefits from them. And as such, we'll suffer by comparison if we don't, get on the train and start making our community as good as we can, by augmenting, what the city and the government already provides. Okay, in the panel discussion, we'll hear about how CIDs have had positive impacts, and from those who've had areas where they've actually been established. So that's it from me. I'll hand over to Ed, who will cover some of the questions that have arisen over the last couple of years. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks all. Evening, can everyone hear me? Good to go?
All good.
Okay, great. So as Neil said, I'll just cover some of the common questions and concerns. And they're generally 3 themes. We'll skip through those quite quickly. The first one essentially is why pay more? And it goes something like, my rates are already ridiculous based on inflated property values. Why should I pay more? Can the city not just deliver the services needed? And I think that the starting point on this question is, look, as fellow residents, we 100% agree in principle that getting improved services for the same or ideally lower rates would be ideal. The thing is that in practice, the question is what viable process exists to achieve this ideal? And given the current socioeconomic reality, we think it's unlikely that part of the city's existing rates pool will be redirected to Fresnaye to the detriment of providing basic services to less affluent communities. The reality is that we are already supplementing existing government provided services like private security, medical, sometimes schooling, retirement saving, could be electricity, water. So is this ideal? Do we like it? Do we agree with it in principle? And the answer to that would probably be no. Is this the reality? The answer to that is yes. So the question then is, given this reality and being practical, what viable process exists to bring improve services to Fresnaye in the short term. And the only clear, well-tested, viable process to achieve this is a CID. Because everyone pays, so there are no free riders, improved services can be delivered at relatively low additional cost and through a sustainable and highly regulated structure. With 100, I think Niels touched on this point, is that with 100% of the additional rates flowing back to Fresnaye, there are actually no other rates or taxes which we currently pay, which will give you such a direct, tangible benefit. So that's the first theme that we've come across over the 2 years. The second question is essentially around governance. And that goes something like, how do I know that the money will be properly managed and allocated to the area? Niels touched on this. CIDs are heavily regulated and are governed by numerous pieces of legislation. You've got the Municipal Property Rates Act, Municipal Finance Management Act, Cape Town Cities Improvement Bylaw, amongst others. As part of the process, Neil touched on it, you have to establish a not-for-profit company. And this itself will be governed by the Companies Act. It needs to be audited. The directors need to be properly elected, and the not-for-profit company needs to run within a well-established compliance and governance framework. One of the reasons that it's actually taken us 2 years to get to this point is that there are so many compliance steps which need to be carefully worked through along the way. So the setup time is a potential downside of the CID, but the resultant highly regulated structure is a definite upside. On the finances more specifically, you've got to come up with a 5-year business plan and related budget, which need to be developed, showing how the improvements are to be achieved. And we're going to run through that in some more detail through the meeting this evening. The budget itself has to be based on the input from residents, and that comes from the urban survey, and it's vetted by the city. So we've had a number of iterations back and forth between ourselves and the city to get the budget and business plan into a state which it's currently in and up on the website, and we'll run through today. The residents then elect the not-for-profit company board directors. These are non-paid directors, and that board then implements the business plan. There's an annual general meeting where residents can attend, ask any questions, and vote directors in or out of the not-for-profit company. So there's full transparency and accountability on the structure. And then the city exercises financial oversight and ensures regulatory compliance of the CID. So for example, you need to send monthly financial reports, need to be submitted to the city so that it can monitor that the CID's expenditure is actually happening against the planned business plan and budget. CID's audited, and its annual financial statements form part of the city's consolidated accounts, which are actually reviewed by the Auditor General. So hopefully that gives a flavor for the degree of kind of transparency, accountability, and governance that's involved in these structures. The third main theme or question is essentially around the public safety element. And the question here goes something like, I already have security for my home, and there's a street initiative in my street. So why is this necessary? And the starting point for this is that public safety was highlighted as the major source of concern by residents. So it's an important part of the business plan or budget, and we'll go into the details on that a bit later. I think the starting point for answering this question, which is very important, is to just draw the distinction between private safety or security and public safety. And although they are linked, the CID is focused on the latter, which is public safety. The CID's not an alternative to the alarm or beams or cameras or electric fence or armed response or whatever it is that you have to secure your home or property. And the security providers in Fresnaye are already doing a great job on this element. The gap or the need, which has been identified by the 315 respondents to the survey, is safety outside the home in the public spaces or streets of Fresnaye. So the focus of the CID is to build on, extend, augment, strengthen, solidify, whatever you want to term it, the existing public safety measures in Fresnaye. And again, the security providers in Fresnaye who are already working on parts of these public safety elements are doing a great job. What the CID structure brings to this public safety need is a holistic neighborhood safety focus rather than a safety focus on a particular street or a particular home. And the key benefit of the CID structure is that everyone pays. So the free rider issue, which threatens the sustainability of current street or neighborhood initiatives, is eliminated. And in doing so, holistic neighborhood public safety is put on a stable, sustainable, and continually viable footing. So the simple idea is to add relevant measures which create an additional layer of protection for the whole neighborhood and all its residents at relatively low cost as everyone pays. So those are the three kind of key questions and themes. And obviously we open to taking many more questions. There's question time at the end of this, and we're happy to engage. We'd love to engage along the way, but we wanted to just cover those three themes up front. The next, we can move to the next slide, which is the proposed area. We can move through this relatively quickly. Is that Neil mentioned that that it was a kind of continuous area, not a house there and a house there, and the map house here and a house there. The proposed area broadly follows the map of Fresnaye. There's a map of it up online. The only kind of different piece is that there's some of Bantry Bay in the southwestern corner is included. And the rationale for that is it's a logical extension because the only entrance into that part of Bantry Bay is through Fresnaye via Ocean View Drive, the only road entrance. So that's why it was included. The area has 1,277 households in it. And if you want to check whether your house is in or not, is that online in the business plan and Annex C, it lists every single house that is in household property that is included in the area. So you can go and check that out if you're not sure. And then the last slide from my side is just if we just flip to is this just to cover the steering committee quickly. We're a dedicated team of 8 residents from across the neighborhood. We just like you. We've got day jobs. Some of us are working parents, and we've got close to 100 collective years of living in Fresnaye between us. In terms of skill set, we've got 150 collective years of both global and local corporate and professional work experience, with expertise ranging from operations, law, medicine, accountancy, architecture, IT, and marketing, so a broad scope. And we've spent approximately 800 hours working on getting the CID to this point. And I think an important point on this, as we've seen some commentary around this, is that we're not paid. We have no vested or outside business interest in getting this established. We just really liked 85% of the 315 survey respondents who said they love Fresnaye, they don't want to live anywhere else, and they'd like to see improvements in our neighborhood. And through our deep engagement with this process over the last 2 years, we believe a CID is the only viable mechanism to get this done. It's also important to note that this committee has been focused on the establishment process or phase. So if any other residents are interested in getting involved or potentially acting as directors of the not-for-profit company to ensure it implements the business plan in the next phase, we encourage you to please do so. And then the last key point, which Neil touched on, is that we've done a lot of partnering along the way. The city is key to this. And as Neil mentioned, Eddie Scott and his team, Runan and UP, are all here tonight. And with that, I'll hand back to the room. Thank you.
Ed, thank you so much. And to Neil, thank you to you too. We will have question time afterwards, both for people who are physically in the room and for those online. Because of time constraints, none of us want a really, really late night. So if you do have questions, especially online, they will be submitted to members of the steering committee and they will get back to you. So nobody's going to be left out in the cold without their question having been answered. But we are going to have a panel discussion now, which the committee thought would be a good idea, just to give people with experience of CIDs some input to you, and to give you the experience of establishing CIDs. They're all gentlemen, so I'm going to say we've got about 5 minutes each, and I may just put my hand up as we're nearing that 5 minutes, if that's okay with you. So we've got Samuel Seif, who's online. Hi, Samuel. I hope you can hear us. We've got Jacques Weber, who you probably all know very well. He's very well known in the area, and he's very involved in as both as a ward councillor in the past. and security in the area. We've got Francois Lawrence, who actually established a CID in Belgemud quite recently, and put huge amounts of work into that, and he'll tell you how difficult it was, but how they've reaped the benefits. And then JP Smith, many of you know, he's in charge of the public safety and security portfolio with the city, but he also knows Sea Point very well. JP, you worked in Sea Point for many years until you went slowly, 10 years until you went slowly mad. Yes, that's right. Yes, and then you went mad in Langa, and now you're just mad in that big building on the foreshore. So I think we'll start with Samuel because you're not in the building, Sampi, if that's okay with you. I just wanted to start by asking you why you're supporting the CID in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. So I've been in the area for 25 years, and whilst the CID stands for City Improvement District, I'm more inclined to look at it as City Sustainability District, because I think we've got a great area. I wouldn't choose to live anywhere else in Cape Town. And for me, the question here is, how do we sustain what we've all been used to, what we've all bought into, and the lifestyle that we'd like to see going forward? Now, Annika, if you've got 5 minutes, I'm going to take 3. I was asked to talk about the question of the CID and the value and the impact that it has on property values. You know, as a property owner here, on which I'm sure all the people on the call are, what impact that has. Now, I can't quite say that there's been any real research done to the extent where we can point to a CID and say, right, that area is doing better than any other area. But you do have specific comparative examples in security estates. And security estates which have got access generally are walled, although this one, nothing will be walled here, have no doubt outshone and outperformed the rest of the market in terms of South African property. So we have an opportunity here where if we constitute the CID, if we increase the security and the safety of the people and the inhabitants within the community, there's no question that our property values will increase. And you really only have to look at the examples of places like Fancourt, Val de Vie, Zimbali, Steyn City, Steenberg, even in this area, the avenues, which is always when properties come on the market, they're generally find a buyer quickly. People are looking for secure living. And one of the things that the CID will do for us, if we get it established, is we'll continue, as I said, to maintain the level and the standards that we're used to, that we're accustomed to, and that we're enjoying. And the best example I can give here is in Cape Town in the early 90s, the Cape Town CID was established, and we, my company was involved, and the late Theodore Yach was one of the biggest proponents of the Cape Town CBD CID. And what happened there was that through the establishment and intervention of the Cape Town CID, Cape Town property owners for the better part of 3 decades have enjoyed a much greater level of return of value. And in fact, Cape Town is the only CBD that works in the country. The others, Johannesburg, Durban, Port Elizabeth, Quebec, sorry, all of those, we now know they don't work. The value of the property owners has dissipated, they're slumlords, and it's not really what you want. So the establishment of the Cape Town CBD CID created a crime and grime activity that prevented the crime and grime. There was extra cameras on, there were extra people on the street, and it allowed our city to keep its value, to be popular. And such is the same way that I think will happen in terms of the Fresnaye CID. It will maintain property values. It will in fact increase them, because if you're buying into an area which has had little or no criminal activity, is clean, is safe and secure, it will command a premium. And last point on that is, if we look at the relative cost that will be recouped in capital growth. Now, I'm not exactly sure of the numbers. I think it was 350 Rand per 10 million Rand of value. I'm just taking an example of somebody who's paying quite a lot, then in additional 700 Rand. If you're paying an additional 700 Rand a month in rates to your CID, that's 8,400 Rand a year. Let's say you stay 12 years while your kids go all the way through school. That's 100,000 Rand. I can almost guarantee you, as we sit here today, that you will recoup that 100,000 Rand and plenty if during that period, your Fresnaye CID has established an area in a suburb that is known for its cleanliness, for its safety, and for security of its inhabitants. So for those reasons, I'm all for it. I think it's an absolute necessity, and I couldn't understand why we wouldn't get 100% of people voting for it.
All right, thanks so much. Samuel Seif, there at home, thanks for contributing this evening. It's much appreciated. I'm going to move on to Jacques Weber, because Jacques, you've been a ward councillor and a board member of the Sea Point CID, and I'm sure you remember the City Improvement District CID and how it actually uplifted that entire area. I mean, before that, you couldn't actually walk in town at all. And so from a security point of view, I think that's why a lot of people are attending this meeting. They're very concerned that security in the area is on the decline, especially with COVID and the amount of people who are without jobs and basically just have nowhere to sleep and are hungry. So if you could just tell us what a Fresnaye CID would look like should there be buy-in. What difference would we see in our suburb? Thanks so much. There are sanitized wipes there. If you just want to wipe the microphone, thank you.
Thanks, Annika. I think it's important to understand that a CID only adds value to an area. There's no two ways that anyone can debate that. Bringing in additional services into an area will always uplift and make that area better in terms of its service delivery. Now, I want to answer one of the questions that came up earlier, which is, we already paying rates. Why do we need to lay another form of a rate onto it? And it's very simple. The city has to spend a large chunk of the Atlantic Seaboard rates across the rest of the city, where those areas cannot afford to pay for services. And again, people say, well, why not use rates in our area? Well, it's very clear. You have to be able to develop the rest of the city, or what happens is you get creep, and those problems, be it crime, be it drugs, will eventually find its way into all areas. And we've seen that in the Atlantic Seaboard. Annika, you mentioned that a few years ago you couldn't really walk on the area, within the area, and that is true. If you remember, around the main road areas, you used to have drug dealing on every single corner. Now, how was that dealt? That was dealt through visible public security, which is what the CID does. We have personnel that are walking up and down the road. We have now just introduced a tactical vehicle that is moving up and down the Regent Road area. And that is what you would see in Fresnaye. You would see, be it public safety, and also want to clear a term that was used, which would be militia. That's not it. It is public safety, that when you, your children, your domestic worker, anyone is walking out from the street, coming home, that they can walk safely without being harassed. And there is often a comment saying, but Fresnaye is isolated, you don't have people. Not true. We have seen that there has been creep from the main road, because often what happens is you've got a very strong presence of policing, be it public city, public security, law enforcement, that we also rent to cops via the city of Cape Town. And because of their presence, you see the creep now move up towards High Level Road to Kloof Road, and or back down towards the Sea Point beachfront. So I want to clear all the information that gets out that is not necessarily correct. Now, through the Fresnaye CID, it is a great area to actually secure and protect, because there are not multiple entrances in it. If you cover your Kloof Road, you cover your Ocean View drives, and some of your side roads, you can pretty much lock down that area very, very well. In an event of an incident happening, by having public safety and there are certain standard operating procedures, you literally close down the area and can prevent that crime within a couple of minutes, or make an arrest, which then can lead to a lot stronger policing and security. One of the things, Annika, that we need to also realize is that the service from the South African Police Service is declining. I can say it, I was in the police for 12 years within the Atlantic seaboard. I've worked a multitude of different areas, and the policing that we have today is not the policing of 8 or 9 years ago. It was far better. You could phone a police station, you would have a van out in your area or in your road within 2-3 minutes. We used to respond to house break-ins. There were no less than 7 or 8 vehicles. JP was around Sea Point that particular time. We are now lucky if you often get 1 or 2 vans on a shift for the entire area. Again, and we can say it, right, well, look at the crime stats. Does it paint a bad picture? Well, there's multiple ways to discuss this. Is all crime being reported within the Atlantic seaboard? And the answer is no. We can see that through social media. As things get harder, jobs get lost, we are seeing that more and more people are moving into the Sea Point area, not as residents, as what I call business opportunities, but based on crime, coming to see what they can do, what they can potentially take. Most recently in other areas, what we're also seeing, which the CID now, if there's a Fresnaye CID can protect, is we are seeing a lot of crime come off the mountains. It has not yet happened in the Atlantic seaboard, but if you go to Oranjezicht, Higgevale, Vredehoek, in one particular month, there was about 3 or 4 armed robberies where they come off Table Mountain National Parks, houses that are bordering, so that's Avenue de Huguenot, Avenue de Longeville, all the roads up the top where you have houses bordering the mountain, were literally coming off the mountain, through a fence, and then conducting an armed robbery. How do you secure that? Well, through a Fresnaye CID, you get the correct surveillance running up on that mountain, thermal cameras, be it foot patrols from your public officers, something that the police cannot do, but you can appoint a team of security officers, visible policing, to say, walk the mountain area between these and these times at night. So that is the security part of a CID. There's still other sections such as cleaning. Often on social media, see, oh, well, there's litter in the roads. The city cannot. It does not have the capability to deploy 10 or 15 cleaners to the area to sweep the streets, but as a CID, you can do it. The Sea Point CID, we have a team of cleaners that work between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And it is amazing. You drive through the area before 8 a.m. in the morning, and you will see the amount of litter all over the area. Drive past by 9:30, the area is cleaned up because those cleaners are walking, cleaning up the area. And that's property prices. I heard Samuel say, that's what someone looks at. If they come in to buy a property and they arrive and there is rubbish lying all over the road, well, I can tell you it's not going to be the most favorable show house that you are going to possibly run. So it's about the environmental change, the area changes. And what is key here? Public safety, public cleaning. We've all got it. We've got the armed responses. We've got the off-site monitoring. That is for your house, but it doesn't help you if your kids, your wife, your family, when you walk outside and then get robbed when they get to the bottom of Kloof Road, which there have been a case previously. So it's about securing the area that you can walk around. You know, I always use the example. I wish we could get back to the time where our kids could ride bicycles out on the road and go for a walk. Well, that is what is happening in the States that Samuel spoke about. So why can't we bring that to certain parts of the area, be it under a Fresnaye CID, where you know that there are certain parks. The parks are secure because there's a CID Fresnaye officer standing within 2 meters of that park, that your kids can go there and enjoy the open public spaces within the Fresnaye area.
All right, thank you so much, Jacques. Well said, and thanks so much for your insight there. Just to be clear, we're not talking about a gated community here like we would see in Johannesburg. This is almost like an invisible ring fence, if you like, rather than gated communities. And I think a couple of questions and concerns which may come up are, will people feel excluded from the community? And I'm going to ask JP to come up just to talk to his experience about that and the interplay between the CID and the city. If you take the podium, please, JP. I just want to clean this. See, I'm cleaning for you now. See, this is a very special moment, JP, that I'm cleaning here for you. Okay. Okay. So JP Smith from the city. If you could just tell us the interplay between the CID and the city, and why aren't you doing the job that the CID is doing? Thanks.
So now I'm crazy and clean.
Crazy and clean, that's good.
So I think that it's a legitimate question to ask why we should pay more, why you should be contributing rates, which because of the way in which the Property Rating Act is written, does tax affluent properties to a greater extent than poorer properties, which the city of course compounds by the threshold of non-rateable property that we have around 400,000 and the indigent relief measures we have. We have a substantial indigent relief package, and that's precisely to prevent a situation where you develop a city that is so unstable and so riven with conflict and people who are in extreme poverty that it destabilizes the city. Many measures we try to make it more tolerable and easier for people in terms of indigence. And I'm also have been the councillor here for long enough to understand that there are people on fixed incomes. I remember sitting with a lady in Ilkley Crescent trying to figure out how not to have her taxed out of a property when the Property Rating Act was introduced. And I appreciate that not everybody has flexible incomes or means to pay, and affordability is a measure. So where there are people within Fresnaye who might be in that situation, the indigent policy of the city does in fact imply they can register as indigent, and Eddie will have to update me if that has changed in the most recent iteration, but they are able to be exempted from the tariff based on the indigent status. The city is in a difficult situation in that at this stage, I don't think it matters who governs the city. You are not going to squeeze more services and more service delivery out of the city as it is. And if you travel around South Africa frequently enough, as I do regularly, you see exactly what Samuel has said. You see that our CBDs, and in fact, big parts of many of our metros around the country have suffered substantial and serious urban decay. Debilitating, and I would say in the case of most of the metros, and at least in the inner city areas, irreversible decay. And in fact, some cities like Joburg have made a very serious effort to reverse that and to adopt some of the principles of Cape Town. But where that process has gone too far, the curve that you have to climb to get back up to the level of sustainability becomes extremely hard. And in this case, it's definitely a matter of precaution or prevention being better. That is why areas like the Voortrekker Road Corridor Improvement District is having great difficulty with recovering. They were very late to arrive to the CID, and they are struggling to get the level of urban regeneration that they're looking for. So acting timeously, I think, is important. There is a displacement effect that as other communities mobilize, whether through CIDs or other vehicles, it does displace some of the problems, and it displaces those problems to the areas of least resistance. And it is also true what Jacques says, that we have certain housebreaking syndicates that operate very much out of the green belts. There is an Uvambo-led syndicate of about 40 men operating to some extent or largely out of Imazamietu and Hout Bay, where I live, and who operate very effectively through these green belts, and who recently perpetrated a series of hits in Higgovale very skillfully. So Fresnaye is vulnerable in that sense. I can tell you that from the city side, we are extremely cognizant of affordability. We have this year passed the lowest collective rates and tariffs increase in the country. There is much anguish over the electricity tariff, but even there, we are subject to what Eskom increases. 80% of the electricity tariff you pay is Eskom. It's directly paid back to Eskom. About another 10% is lost through transmission. Simple physics, electricity is lost in the process of reticulation. And then another 10% is the little money we get out of it for the maintenance of that infrastructure, replacing cables that are stolen, electricity boxes that are vandalized and driven into by vehicles, and just general maintenance. It is not possible to stretch that budget anymore. And in terms of paring down fat, that has happened iteratively so many times that I challenge you to go find fat sitting in that budget. That budget is a very frugal affair managed by an extremely frugal deputy mayor in the form of Ian Nielsen. And it is correct that we are required to render equitable services. There is a yearning by some to see rates money concentrated in the areas where it is gathered. That cannot happen. That's not how local government works. There is no mechanism in local government to do that. You must render equitable services across the money with the total pool of rates received. There isn't a mechanism for ring fencing. The nearest to that provision is this endeavor you're embarking on, the CID. It is one way for residents to gain control over a portion of the rates money they contribute and to lift the overall standards above that basic level that council is able to achieve. In future years, maybe we have a lower level of in-migration. Maybe we have less aggressive urbanization in South Africa. We're one of the fastest urbanizing countries in the world at the moment, and Cape Town is the fastest urbanizing city. People vote with their feet to where they think the opportunities are. And that means we have large burgeoning areas of informal settlements, thanks to the PI Act and the disaster management regulations, which has made it very easy to invade land and very hard to stop people. We are required to render services in due course to those communities and to the backlog of services that exist in many parts of our city. There is no easy way to avoid that. And that may stop those things, those dynamics may eventually tilt, and we're able to focus on higher service levels in all parts of the city as we would like it. But as it is now, with the way South Africa's economy and socioeconomic situation is now, a huge amount of our investment monthly goes into housing provision and the establishment of basic services, sidewalks, public lighting, and basic amenities in communities that don't have it. And that is just the reality of it. And there's no way you're going to avoid doing so. Those communities also have expectations about basic services. And if those services are not forthcoming, the level of social instability eventually affects everybody. So it is what you're doing is making an investment in topping up your service levels above what council is able to create the kind of community that everybody wants to live in. And I have watched city improvement districts across the city, including here in Sea Point, play a major role. Sea Point could very easily have faced a very different fate than it currently enjoys. It was on a very different trajectory for a long time. Throughout the 1990s, Sea Point was getting grim. I walked with many of those buildings and later also in the presence of Jacques when he was actively involved, when we had El Rio and other buildings that were blatant slums where people were being thrown out of 6-story windows and electrical wires dangled on the side of the buildings with illegal connections. A lot has changed in the fortunes of Sea Point in that time, and the CID had a massive role to play in that. Same with the city centre in Cape Town and the same with CIDs, the 47 CIDs throughout the city. They play a massive role in the urban regeneration of areas. Not through exclusion, but by uplifting services and attacking the two main factors, crime and grime, that drive that, and having the ability to become an organizational node in the suburb, because that's really what a CID is. It's an engine room of a place where initiatives can be grown and driven, whether that is social development interventions around homelessness or greening or marketing of an area. There's a great deal of good that CIDs do. I think probably the majority of social upliftment in the city on the homeless front is done by city improvement districts through the outreach workers they pay for across the city. So I've never been ashamed of lobbying for CIDs. I think special rating areas or CIDs are an incredibly useful way for residents to protect their service levels. And I want to conclude by saying that it is a dated survey. It is a dated study that was done. So you may choose not to place too much value by it. But early on in this situation, when I think we were only around 10 or 15 CIDs, there was a think tank that started looking at the implications and the matters around it. And it was around the time when we reviewed our gated community policy. And they undertook a study around the impact of CIDs. And at that stage, we could demonstrate that these CIDs in areas where they were deployed, measured against areas adjacent to that were in a similar economic situation and similar home prices, that the CIDs over a 5-year period begat around a 30% increase in property values. And it's not difficult to understand why it would do that. It is simple that an area that is cleaner, safer, and better run with clear road markings and clean parks is a more desirable area to live in, and people will pay more to live there. So if you have no community-spirited desire to invest in a CID, do so out of pure self-interest, in that it is extremely likely, as Samuel has said, that the amount you will invest over time will more than adequately recouped through your sale of your property in the end. It is an investment in your own property value. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, JP. So you heard there from JP, we're not going to get more money from the city for health, hygiene, security. It's really up to us residents on how we take this forward. And a CID is a possible and workable solution. And to tell us a little bit more about this, Francois Lawrence is online. Francois, thank you so much for joining us. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, Francois, just to introduce you, you're a board member of a recently established CID in Welgemoot. If you could just briefly tell us why you decided to establish a CID there and what the change has been for residents in the area. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Now, maybe I can first start, like, it's actually amazing to hear all of this. I think it's factually everything that everybody's saying, from Ed, Jock, JP, factually very correct. And we've been in the same situation. And I think we've played all of these discussions, we've played back about, a year and a half ago. Maybe to start is just acknowledging the efforts of the steering committee. I've been one of them, the founding steering committee. It's really a very selfless job, and I mean, from my side, not even being part of Fresnaye, I just want to thank you guys. I think it needs people like this, very dynamic team. So you've got a very strong team to lead you through this. So well done on that. And I think just also recognition and thank you for, we haven't had a time to actually thank JP Smith for his support in getting the Welgemoot CID established. He's really been very good at just positioning us well and fielding some of the difficult questions that we might have had from some of the residents. And also the CID team, Eddie and Runan and UP and Bonita, thank you again. I think that team specifically, they partnering with this steering committee to make it happen. And although sometimes it might feel that they a little bit, strict on the boundaries and what it is, I mean, now that we're in it, we realize that, a CID has got very specific purpose, and, you have to fit within that. So maybe to answer your question, why we've established the CID. So Welgemoot has been a little bit different. We've established Welgemoot Safe, which was kind of a proactive measurement to have cameras, LPR cameras in our entrances of Welgemoot, and that was about 8 to 9 years ago, where we had a syndicate operating within Welgemoot, and it was quite stressful because we had no intelligence. It was always reactive, and a few people just got together and we raised funds to put up the capital infrastructure and centralize the intelligence into a control room. We've always wanted to establish a CID. The reason for that is that you've got only a few people. We had 40% of the neighborhood actually funding it. And the other challenge is it's not a sustainable way to continue the funding because the infrastructure has to be kept up. We still didn't have a centralized mechanism to liaise with all the city departments. So it was really a first step. And then, as it went, one of our Welgemoot Safe members said, look, let's just establish the CID, went through all the pain. But the main reason was to create a sustainable mechanism so that Welgemoot has a funded vehicle that can add within the portfolios of what's been formalized. So I'll quickly run through those. Firstly, it's security. Security is a big thing. I mean, we started our slogan, so I think you'll see a big part of your drive now is communication and making people aware of what it is, what it's not, and why it's important. I think tonight's, it's really just taking tonight's facts and make it palatable and easy to understand to your residents. But our first slogan was taking back our streets. I think Jacques mentioned that. It's such a practical thing. And I can tell you now, since we've established the CID and the additional public safety measures we've got in place, even my children are playing in the streets again. They're cycling to streets, meeting each other. So, in the parks, which 2-3 years ago would have never happened. It's just, so there's a association of it's not safe, but once the measures are there, people start relaxing and, start using the public facilities again. And the slogan for CID more recently has become a better Welgemoot for all, which really talks to the heart of the community drive. It's for all. So I think, and maybe the thought to that is when you look at establishing a CID, you have to kind of channel your energy to the 60% of people that are supporting it. So you're always going to get those people that don't want to support this. I would say you don't have the time to convince them. There's enough people, if they understand what this is, that will support this. And I would say to this group, is to focus your energy on getting the people that would support this and getting their votes, because you only need 60% plus one to get this through. So that's the rule, and that's the communication that you, I think, need to go by. So yeah, so it's maybe some of the benefits we've seen. So from a security, I'll quickly run through the 5 portfolios that we've established. Each of them has got a portfolio leader or, you know, a director that's very passionate about that within, you know, the CID. Firstly, is security. We have enhanced our security measure and control with 2 additional public vehicles, patrolling vehicles, 3 additional 6 additional drivers driving the patrolling, you know, armed response people driving the 2 vehicles. We have also added 3 additional control people within the 24/7 control for cameras. So there's already 9 additional resource people and 2 additional vehicles. We are in the process of adding capital infrastructure at strategic places to put fencing up. We're not fencing Welgemoot down, but we are where we've got weak spots. We're fencing that to a degree where we've got you know, pedestrians coming into specific areas, and that will be monitored via cameras. So you can still get into the area, but wherever you come in, we'll be monitoring it, and there's intelligence around that. Cleaning and greening, firstly for social responsibility. When we started the CID, we always thought that the social responsibility was kind of a window dressing thing. I soon realized that a part of your crime or your homeless people, you know, sleeping within, you know, your areas, there's a social problem there, and you need to partner with the, you know, organizations in and around Cape Town to kind of understand why they are in your areas. How can you partner with them to assist them and kind of do a kind of an assessment of who they are, where they're from, and how can you maybe reconnect them to their family. So there's a whole social responsibility part of this problem. And then what we've done is we've also then partnered with MES. It's a you know, organization within the northern suburbs, and they take homeless people, take them through a process, and then employ them back into Welgemoot as cleaners. So they actually partner then within the cleaning and greening budget. So we buy them back to clean our streets. So, you know, if you go to Welgemoot now, you'll see it's a very clean environment. There are people with little bibs in the, you know, in the mornings. We will see it's branded MES. There are homeless people cleaning our area. Then it's community drive. Greening. So our parks has become like a big, you know, driver for the community, and a lot of excitement in, you know, discovering the parks, I would say, and really investing in making that a destination for residents. And lastly is the community drive. So part of this, because you're communicating to the whole, you know, group of residents, you end up, you know, you can facilitate. COVID hasn't been great, but you can facilitate community drives. So we've established a golf run on the golf course, where once on full moon we do a run, and you know, there's all cool stuff that you can also schedule, let's say quarterly, where historically you wouldn't have been able to do that because you don't have everybody's contact details. So there's definitely a community flavor that practically comes out of this just because of all these elements working together. I hope that helps.
That does. That's a huge help. Thanks for your insight, and it sounds very positive. Perhaps at one of the next meetings we can ask you about some of the processes that you had to, and the hoops that you had to jump through in order to establish the CID. But thank you so much for coming online and sharing with us. I don't want this meeting to run too over time, because we all have things to do this evening, and, well, actually, most of us don't really, but we've got things to do tomorrow morning. So I'm going to ask Ryan Janks to come up, who's on the steering committee. Ryan, if you could just tell us a little bit about public safety, and then we'll go on to the other steering committee members before going to questions. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Annika. I'm not sure, can you hear me? Okay, great. So just to say that I'm, same as Annika, cognizant of the fact that the meeting's been going on for a while. I'm not a keen public speaker, so I'm more than happy to cut my piece short. I do have an important piece to talk about, which is the public safety element of our business plan, but I'll try to run through it as quickly as I possibly can. Just to say that once again, the budget and the allocation of resources has been made based on the survey that was originally done. Over 300 members of the Fresnaye community responded to the survey, and we have allocated resources accordingly. Just to perhaps unpack some of that, some of the questions that were asked.
39% of Fresnaye members or members of the community said that they themselves or a member of their family or a close member of their community had either been affected by crime themselves. 75% of people said they wouldn't allow their kids to walk alone in the neighborhood, and I think that's a very significant stat. 87% of the people who responded to the survey have kids under the age of 18. And I think the fact that so many people felt it wasn't safe for their children to walk in the streets is quite an indictment. 50% of people said they were comfortable walking alone in the neighborhood. This is adults, which means that a large percentage of adults don't feel safe walking in the neighborhood. 29% of people said they feel that the neighborhood itself is safe. So one could argue that these stats are true or they're not true, but this is in fact what we received in our survey. The solution that we've developed comprises of three main elements. It's a camera infrastructure, a control room monitoring piece, and a patrol piece, very similar to what Welgemoed have put in place. The camera infrastructure basically comprises of CCTV element, license plate recognition technology, and what are cameras called PTZ or pan, tilt, and zoom technology. The control room would involve live operator monitoring the control room and tech-enabled smart detection analytical intelligence to support the live operator. The patrol element would involve vehicle patrols, foot patrols, pardon me, and contracted law enforcement officers to supplement. Just to say that perhaps unpack the three camera elements a little bit more, the CCTV element would enhance the currently non-existent neighborhood perimeter security, creating a virtual boundary. The cameras would be placed at all 17 street entrances and other strategic points within the neighborhood. The license plate recognition technology would provide early warning of vehicles connected to crime moving through the area through license plate recognition technology. This license plate recognition technology would be linked to other networks across the city, allowing instant info sharing. And finally, we discussed briefly the issue with the mountain and possible crime coming off the mountain. The pan, tilt, and zoom technology would allow us to monitor the movement into and out of the area through the mountain. So that would probably play an important part in the solution. The control room, just to say that the control room will use this technology-enabled smart detection intelligence to identify threats and alert dedicated control room operators who would then process the information coming through the cameras on a 24-hour basis. The technology also acts as a virtual tripwire, alerting operators to unusual behavior, and it acts as a backup to anything that could potentially be missed by the human operator. The operators would then be able to dispatch appropriate medical and security personnel as and when needed. The third element would be the patrols and response, which we've spoken a little bit about already. Vehicle patrols, foot patrols, and finally dedicated city law enforcement officers. That last element is quite important because we would then have the ability to process infringements through the criminal justice and social support infrastructure, and that would also offload some of the pressure on the foot patrols and vehicle patrols, freeing them up to do the work that they're really there for. Just to say that the overall budget that's been allocated was 4.5 million rand, and we envisage using about 2 million rand for the camera infrastructure, 500,000 towards monitoring, and 2 million towards the patrolling element. That's in the first year of the business plan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hauke, if you could just come and also on the steering committee, tell us a little bit about cleaning and greening, please. As you heard from Francois, that played quite a big role in Welgemoot. Thanks so much.
Yes, I've started a cleaning initiative a few months ago in Fresnaye, so you might know me already by asking you for money to donate. I'm not here to ask you for that now. I'm just going to talk to a little bit about greening and cleaning. Basically, the survey said that only 20% of the respondents were actually satisfied with the general cleanliness of the area, which is no surprise to me. If you walk around Fresnaye, in the first instance, it would look clean, but the more you start looking at the spaces, you see there's actually layers of litter and overgrown greenery. So from the survey as well, it said the maintenance of the streets and the verges are a big problem. You can see on the side of the streets, there's litter literally stuck in the sides of the streets and hasn't been removed. Litter, dog, fouling dog waste, or let's call it what it is, dog poo. It's everywhere, every day on my walk. I walk every day. I pick up between 10 and 15 bags of dog waste. Now one can say everyone must just pick it up. That's unfortunately not happening. Also in the survey, it was clear that the frequency of the basically the landscaping, the grass cutting, as you can see at the moment, there has not been much done in that. Illegal dumping is a very big problem. There's a lot of construction, like in every city, there's lots of construction going on. There are spaces in Fresnaye where there's literally illegal dumping on a daily basis. So contractors basically leave their materials there. They feel that's a dumping space, and we don't actually have even cameras so we can control this and see who is dumping these spaces. The urban decay is also one of the main issues that was in the survey. And then we have only 13% of the respondents were actually satisfied with the state of the public spaces, which includes the parks. And of those 13%, 87% of the respondents have kids under 18. So that's very, very alarming, I would say. When it comes to green and cleaning solutions now, so what do we have to, what are we proposing with the CID? First of all, we need to make sure that we maintain our area on a right level. I would even go a little bit further and say above a right level, make it even better. Halt the decay, I would also say even go a step further, reverse the current decay of the area. What would be the actions? Number one would be definitely we need a regular cleaning of the pavements. So there needs to be a cleaning staff that will actually service those streets. We have already introduced a few bins as part of like a project to see what it would actually do in the area. We put 5 bins in there, the access points to the mountains, and it has already helped a lot with the litter. So that's definitely something that we need to also embrace more. We need more bins on all the access points to the parks and where people walk in general. We're going to liaise with the City of Cape Town on C3 fault report mechanism. There will be also a button on the website that you can directly then report to the City of Cape Town, and obviously we will help following up with that. Upgrade of parks, public spaces, including mountain access points. I just talked about a little bit with putting the bins, and also make sure that there is no litter at those points, because a lot of people also drive there to these access points that are not even from Fresnaye. Design, landscape, maintaining existing planted areas, trimming overgrown trees and plants. We have the most beautiful palm trees in Fresnaye, and those areas, those palm trees need to be maintained, and all the little islands that we have in Fresnaye, they need desperate maintenance. We need to replant overgrown and with alien species and put indigenous species back. That's a no-brainer. Also sustainable plants that don't need a lot of water, even though we have a lot of water at the moment, it can always change. Upgrading children's play facilities, especially in the parks. They need to be more kids friendly, and there need to be more facilities for the kids to actually go and play. And we need to introduce exercise facilities, which I definitely need. Not sure if I'm going to use them, but it would be nice to have that. So I would definitely say that is, as you see on the promenade, it's amazing. Even if you just want to walk past and see people exercising, might make you think maybe I should stop eating and exercise. Traffic calming measures, that's one very, very important point that I would like to point out. There have been quite a lot of accidents lately that we've caught on cameras, and the whole community saw them by people speeding down the roads. That's also part of safety, where we always talk about safety with crime, but I would also talk about that. This is a neighborhood. There's children, there are people walking with dogs. This needs to be addressed, and this is very important for the neighborhood. This last part is for me very important. We need to create employment opportunities. Not everyone is as fortunate as us that have a job. There's a lot of people that are looking for jobs. There's a lot of people that need jobs. So with the CID, we can actually make a real difference, not only to the community, but also to the country, because we can offer employment and we can link up with social responsibility teams. But more about that, Michael will tell you more about the social responsibilities. I will talk to you a little bit later about the voting.
Thanks so much, Andreas. I just want to say thank you to you from everyone in Fresnaye, because you're one of the few people I know who've actually not stopped moaning and actually done something about it. So yeah, big bouquet to you, because you really have made a huge difference to our area. Thank you so much.
But then I also want to say thank you for everyone that contributed, including Annika, which is a big supporter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Mike Philippides is going to talk to us about social responsibility. Thanks, a very important element of the CID. Mike.
Okay, hi everyone. I promise to be the quickest speaker here tonight. A remarkable 81% of respondents said that they wanted to get involved in social upliftment. A large part of the focus tonight has been on crime and security and aspects like that, but a huge amount of people in the neighborhood actually want to help other people who are less fortunate than the rest of us. The CID has already started chatting to a lot of NFPs, Stripevac, Project Hope, The Haven, people or NFPs that are involved in the upliftment of other people. We've started chatting to them about using the people that they're already supporting, helping to support them financially, and also using their resources. Like Andreas has mentioned, well, in fact, we can see how well Andreas's cleaning and greening scheme has gone. He's taken people who are unemployed, people that are homeless. He's actually given them a purpose. He's given them a job, and he's given them money, which is really, it gives them dignity. So through initiatives like a CID, we can actually promote things like this, and we can actually help with education, social upliftment, adult learning, skills, training support, things like that. Thanks.
Ed, I'm going to ask you to come in on Zoom, please. If you can hear us, just to talk about budget and finance.
The interesting bit.
Yeah.
What everyone's been waiting for. Yeah, no, we'll zoom through this pretty quickly. Is that the first and most important point is that the full budget, every line item of the budget is up on the website. It's included in the business plan, and so it's all there for everyone to see. What I just want to give in terms of some background is that the point of departure in putting the budget together is striking this very fine balance. We've talked a lot about affordability on the one hand for residents. We're sensitive to that point, and then the ability to actually cover the needs identified. So it's striking a balance between those two things. The max budget in terms of the regulation is that a CID can be up to 25% of additional rates. What we decided to do was to be guided by the survey responses, which indicated, and by way of the weighted average, that 6.88% was a generally palatable number for the majority of residents. And that was, some people were happy to pay up to 20%, others were 15%, but the vast majority were under 10%. So this range of up to 20 and then the concentration under 10 is reflected in this weighted average of 6.88%. We took that and we came up then with a budget of 7.225 million. A year is the total budget, and this is actually an increase of 6.5%. So we undershot the weighted average of 6.88, and we think that this achieves this very fine balance of affordability on the one hand, but then also being able to implement improvements that residents will actually see in a perceptible way. There's no point in launching a CID and not having enough budget to move the needle in terms of a perceptible difference. So we think that it strikes, or we hope that it strikes that fine balance. The priorities, I think, have been clear throughout the presentation today. They're on the slide before. public safety came out top, followed by cleaning and greening, and then social, and that we used those priorities to then engage in the amount of work that we needed to do. So we engaged professionals in the public safety area, service providers, spoke to them around what is to get an understanding for the possibility of measures which could meet the needs that have been identified and what the related costs are. So that's kind of the bottom up of how this budget was built. And then you'll see the split on the slide of what the breakdown of the budget is. You can see that public safety is 62% of the total budget, and the others are in there. The slide that we're looking at now is the next level of detail. It's got across the 5 years what the budget is, and then what the total is for each of those items over the 5 years. And you'll see core business is the big headline number. That's public safety, cleaning and greening, and social is all consolidated in there. Outside of that, the largest number is the employee-related costs, and that's to the personnel that will be employed to run the day-to-day operation of the CID. Is that CIDs would generally employ a service manager to run the day-to-day operation of the CID, and that's what that cost is in there for. It's for a CID manager, and there's also provision for some administrative help. Importantly, this is not for the directors who are non-remunerated. And that's it. You can hand over back to Neil, who will talk through what the actual number impact will be for residents.
Thanks so much, Neil. I haven't cleaned your microphone there, so that's just cool. Be careful. Thanks so much. Just briefly impacts on you and governance.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll be super quick because I would say 99% of the points that are across this and the next couple of slides have already been covered. So impact to the individual, again, Ed's already said it's going to be, what we're looking for is a 6.5% increase on your current rates bill, which equates to 376 Rand per 10 million of property value, which again is like 12 Rand a day, which I think, given all the benefits that we've heard tonight and what a CID can provide and what it can do for the community, seems like a pretty trivial amount in the grand scheme of things. Again, like it's on there. If you qualify for rates relief currently, that'll also apply to the additional rate. We can probably move to the next slide, which gives you a bit of a breakdown on the proposed budgets there. And then you can see the municipal property values, 10, 15, 20 million. And then all the way on the far right-hand side is the monthly contribution at those levels. And then we've also got the average and median there. Just to note, this is for residential properties. There's a different rate for non-residential properties, but we think that's pretty low impact in the areas. It's primarily residential. So that's really the finance and governance. Again, all of this will be on the website for you to view at your leisure. We don't need to go through it in detail now. And then just on governance is probably the last piece for me. Again, we've been at pains to say how highly regulated and controlled the whole CID framework is. Annual audit monitored by the city. We don't need to repeat any of that. As Ed mentioned, everybody who is currently on the steering committee and the directors are likely to be people that have full-time jobs. So we will need to employ somebody to be a salaried full-time manager. They will be running the day-to-day operations, but they'll be taking direction from the board, and there'll be oversight from the city. And that's really the main points on governance. There's way more detail if you care to go and read it, which is on the website, but I suspect this will do for most people.
Thanks, Neil. I'll actually give the website details out when we close the meeting. Andreas, just very quickly, the next steps, please. If you could just, before we go to questions, just tell us on the way forward. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm back. So the voting process. So please support the CID by the 24th of September. As already mentioned, there's 1,277 properties in Fresnaye area. We need about 767 to vote yes. Very confident that after this meeting that we've answered most of your questions. If you have more questions, you can always email. We compiled a little video where it basically explains how to vote. It's not that it's a very complicated process, but with compliance and make sure that the right person votes that also lives in Fresnaye, there's a few steps which the video will be on our website and will be also on our YouTube channel. So you can rewatch the video as many times as you like if you have trouble. A few general things I need to mention here. The votes are online, but you still need to print out the form. Deadline 24th of September, as I mentioned. If you have questions, you can email info@fresnaycid.co.za. It's also on the website. And if you are a trust or a company, there's a paperwork. We do have a PDF that's also on the voting form that you can actually print out and you can go step by step. So we're gonna play a little video that you can see how to vote and how the voting process works.
Here is a guide on how to vote for the CID for individual owners. Please visit our website www.fresnaycid.co.za. Click on the top menu, Vote Online. On the voting page, please fill in any of the fields required. Use the drop-down to find your street name. Then select your street number and click Submit. On the next page, go to Download Voting Ballot. Now you need to verify the email address that you are registered with. Simply enter your email address. Then enter it again to confirm. Enter your first name and your last name. Finally, enter your cell phone number. Choose yes or no, depending on whether you'd like to be contacted after the submission. Now your final ballot form is ready for you to download. Simply click Download Voting Form. Your personal voting ballot will open with all your details pre-filled out. Please check if all the details are correct and simply scroll down to the bottom. To vote yes, simply choose the first option or the second to object. Then sign below. If there's more than one owner registered, please make sure that both sign. You can either use a digital signature or print the form, sign it and email it back to info@fresnaycid.co.za. If you need further assistance, you can also download our voting ballot instructions here. If your property is registered in a trust or in a company, please refer to the instructions and make sure to send all the supporting documents along with your ballot form. Fresnaye, a community together.
All right, thanks so much, everybody. It's nearly time for the meeting to wrap up. I'm going to ask if online has any burning questions, which Dan Stillerman can facilitate for us, please. Dan, are you standing by?
Hi, Annika. I am here. I think Ed is going to facilitate.
Okay, so
Yep.
Ed, if you can see anyone with any
I've got some questions.
They can be very quick. They don't have much time,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
we'll get through as many as we can. Thanks so much.
We've got a question here, and I think that this would be to the guys in the city, if that's possible. It's from David Rose. Is there not a risk that if the CID raises funding to improve the area, the city will simply divert more of their rates income to other areas?
JP, can I give this to you?
No, because the amount of services is fixed and there's no chance of that happening. What happens sometimes is slightly the reverse, because the CID starts monitoring the level of service delivery, and where the city falls short of those agreed service levels, we start being held accountable or start being called out by the CID. So if anything, it ensures that you get adequate service delivery. So no, it's no risk of that.
Thanks so much. I'll take a question from the room. Is there anybody present here at the meeting that has a question? How embarrassing for you all. Ed,
Yes, I've got
the
some others.
information was so good, but if you could just, take some more from online, please.
I think that this one might be for Jacques or JP. There's a theme here, and it's a bit around, you know, kind of statistics to back up improvement, or statistics to back up crime. So the one is there any supporting statistics besides the increase? This is from Jenna Barenblatt. Is there any supporting statistics besides the increased value of seaboard properties to show that Sea Point CID has in fact improved the area in terms of security, decrease in crime, service delivery, and vagrants? I think the concept is fantastic. Would be interested to see how it worked in Sea Point since its inception up until recently during COVID. And I think that it's probably a relatively complicated answer, but Jacques, maybe you could just give us a high level feel for a response on that answer, that question.
So in terms of crime, yes, indeed. If we look back about 6 or 7 years ago when Sea Point Main Road, probably a bit longer, probably about 8 years ago, went through its worst period with a number of robberies happening within the areas, the drug peddling along that area. And that was criminal cases reported by SAPS to what we see now. I think in the last financial year along the Sea Point CID area, there was only one serious crime reported for that entire stretch, where if you look back a couple of years ago, you had 4, 5, or 6 of those cases. Homelessness is a very big discussion point, which will take a lot longer than the 1 minute that Annik's giving me. That has increased. It has increased across the city and specifically since COVID, we've seen the numbers drive. JP touched on it around the PI Acts and the acts that the city's facing, currently in court around that. So that is a discussion on itself. But I think if you look at certain areas around the city, Sea Point's not alone in that. And if you look at areas beyond the CID, I think a lot of that has creeped into other areas, not necessarily on the main road. Why? Because there is that 24-hour presence of foot guards and visible policing within the area.
Thanks for answering that, Jacques. Have you got one more question for us, Ed? And then I think I'm going to wrap up.
Okay, that's good. So I'll just, there's one question. There are a lot of questions in relation to boundaries. So it's just to put out there that we won't answer that here because there are too many variations of where the boundary should stretch or not. So we'll get back to people on that. I think that the last question should be this question that the person who asked it was David Cohen, and he said it's a question for JP Smith. And he says, from a crime stats perspective, is crime on the rise in the proposed area? All the other CID examples had serious safety security issues that required direct intervention, but not clear if the data supports this theory in Fresnaye. And look, we've thought about this question ourselves as the steerco, so we can also give a bit of an answer, but it was directed to JP.
JP, are you happy to take this?
I think the combination of myself and Jacques, the point that Jacques made around crime stats not being necessarily reported is probably needs to be stated. There are some of the property crime which, unless somebody is intending to claim from insurance, they are not going to report. Jacques would be better placed to give you current crime stats on this localized basis. The point from which I see the stats is citywide, and I can't speak to the detail. But I will say to you that it is a huge relief and comfort to know that you're able to access your public spaces and not be on constant alert. There were, the comment was made earlier that you may already be contributing to certain security interventions. And I know from some of the other CIDs that where they were able to consolidate their funding, if you look at the median costs that were suggested, which would be around just over R1,000 a month, you may well be able to forego some of your other security arrangements in lieu thereof. If you're able to collectively bargain for a better armed response and security response capability, it may well be possible to reduce the security expenditure that you're already engaging in otherwise. And that might achieve a different saving that would mitigate the cost that was suggested there. It was something that wasn't said earlier, and from my experience with other CIDs, that's definitely the case. That you are at your strongest when an entire community is negotiating security prices rather than individual property owners. Thank you.
Thanks so much, JP. I'm going to wrap this meeting up now, just to remind you that this is going to be one of many online meetings and public participation meetings that is needed in order for a CID to be established. JP has said that he has actually had situations where he's gone door to door to make sure that people come on board. There need to be 60% of property owners in the area need to agree to this before the steering committee can actually lodge an application. So Fresnaye residents, you can't actually be apathetic here. You actually need to go to your neighbors, people who haven't attended meetings, and explain to them and do a bit of PR for your neighborhood if you want this to actually take place. I'm also told by a source very high up that this steering committee is extremely organized. So thank you so much to all of you and well done. It's a thankless job. And I know you've put a lot of hours in. To our panelists, thank you so much for coming. You have a long day and I know that you put in the extra time. So first meeting is officially closed. There will be more information forthcoming and there is a website where you can, let me just get the website for you. All this information will be uploaded, www.fresnayecid.co.za. So if you want to go through any of those documents again, Ed, would you please be so kind as to go through some of the questions and just disseminate them where you see appropriate so nobody doesn't feel as if they haven't been heard?
Yeah, that's great. I've answered a lot online, and the remaining ones will get answers to all those people. No question will be left unanswered. Thanks.
Steering committee, can we close? It's a wrap, everyone. Thank you so much.